He-Man and the Masters of the Universe ruled the 1980s. Kids all over gravitated to this exciting Battle of Eternia, where its strong, muscular hero He-Man would forever be in a battle for good in order to stop his evil nemesis, Skeletor. There was a cartoon which was compulsive viewing, action figures which flooded the toy aisles, and even comic books. However, just as Masters of the Universe had reached the top, it had all come spectacularly crashing down. What with a sudden dramatic decline in toy sales, as well as a theatrical movie being made by an incompetent movie studio on the brink of financial collapse. However, nowhere is the downfall of Masters of the Universe more compelling and spectacular than when all its problems accumulated with the creation of Pig Boy. A poor kid who won a contest to star in the then upcoming He-Man movie and was forever immortalized with the indignity of being Pig Boy. So today we're going to explore the spectacular rise and fall of Masters of the Universe, the good, the bad, and the Pig Boy. So in today's Weird Tales, we're going to explore the epic toys, battles, and Pig Boy of Masters of the Universe, as we explore the early days of success and then sudden sharp decline of Masters of the Universe. Let's check it out. He-Man and the Masters of the Universe first hit the public consciousness in 1982. Originally called Lords of Power, this new action figure lineup was made to capitalize on the action figure market of that time, which was aimed at young boys, which was a new market started by Star Wars action figures. Incidentally, Mattel, who were behind the Masters of the Universe action figures, turned down the opportunity to make Star Wars figures in the late 70s with the release of the first Star Wars movie, so they were going to make sure that they got on board with the craze now with their own new exciting toy line. The theme was sword and sorcery mixed in with bodybuilding musculature. It was pretty simple. You had the good guys and the bad guys. He-Man was our hero and defender of Grayskull. And then there was Skeletor, his ghoulish nemesis, who represented all that was evil, who wanted to get his hands on He-Man's power sword. He-Man even came complete with his trusty Battle Cat, which, funny enough, was a recycled toy from a previous toy line called Big Jim, all the way back in 1970, just refurbished and repackaged for He-Man. So as mentioned, the He-Man action figures were manufactured by toy company Mattel, and the creation of this franchise is credited to designer Roger Sweet and fellow designer Mark Taylor. In order to keep children invested in the array of unique, colourful characters, Mattel knew that it needed to create some lore, a backstory for each character, so kids would know who was the goodies and who were the baddies. So each action figure would come with a little mini comic book, giving a little backstory and insight into who these interesting characters were. And it just so happens that the Federal Communications Commission had just relaxed a ban on children's TV shows being based on toys or selling toys. So Mattel were looking into making a cartoon series in order to help sell their He-Man action figures. Animation studio Filmation was chosen to helm the TV series, which over the years had created many popular cartoons, including a Star Trek animated series and a Batman animated series, with Filmation founder Lou Scheimer overlooking the He-Man cartoon. The cartoon would also expand on the lore, such as creating He-Man's alter ego, Prince Adam, as well as creating the fantasy world of Eternia, He-Man's glorious, fantasy-based homeland. The animated series was pitched to the ABC network, but they turned it down, so instead He-Man and the Masters of the Universe was pitched at a television programming conference, where it was sold off to independent stations. The He-Man and the Masters of the Universe cartoon made its broadcast debut on September the 26th, 1983, and if you can believe it, that was the exact day that I was born. All up, 130 episodes were produced, consisting of 2 seasons, along with a female-led spin-off called She-Ra, Princess of Power. Children all over America, and eventually all over the world, gravitated to the adventures of He-Man and his Castle Grayskull, who was in a never-ending battle against the evil Skeletor, who along with his lineup of monstrous henchmen was constantly at battle with He-Man, where Skeletor's plans are to overthrow Eternia's champion so he can become evil ruler and gain ultimate power. He-Man and the Masters of the Universe had now overtaken Star Wars as the next big franchise that children would become fanatical over. It had become the most popular syndicated children's program and broke boundaries of censorship standards. Unlike the 70s, He-Man could now get into scrapes and fisticuffs with his menacing opponents, in which beforehand showing any kind of violent combat in cartoons was a big no-no, it wasn't allowed. Masters of the Universe had become so huge, it would also become Filmation's most successful cartoon. This show was a certifiable hit, and a pop cultural phenomenon was born. The cartoon definitely paid off too for Mattel, as in 1983, the Masters of the Universe toy line made $38 million. However, by the time you get to 1984, there was a massive spike in product consumption, as that year the Masters of the Universe brand made somewhere between $350 million to $400 million. Wow! We're in the money, hey? Then in 1985, Masters of the Universe would bring in another $450 million for Mattel. Clearly, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe had become a successful brand, and it had reached the top. Sadly though, once you've reached the top, sometimes there's only one place to go afterwards. Now that Masters of the Universe had conquered the toy aisles and the world of syndicated cartoons, it seemed that the next big step was the big screen, with a live-action He-Man movie.
Masters of the Universe. Live the adventure.
Now, the brand had already dabbled with the big screen, as in 1985 The Secret of the Sword was released, which was a He-Man and She-Ra animated movie. Although it was basically really just an extended episode, so, something for parents to take their annoying children to go and see during school break, it was still successful, bringing in $7.5 million on a $2 million budget. However, Mattel were looking for a movie studio to produce a live-action Masters of the Universe movie. Now surely this would be money in the bank. After all, this franchise was huge and an unstoppable moneymaker. However, really, the live-action movie was dead on arrival, all thanks to one movie studio, the Cannon Film Group. A movie company known for releasing copious amounts of movies, and most of them not very good, and a huge majority of them divulging into schlock, with such timeless classics as Breaking 2 Electric Boogaloo, a movie of which its title has become more memorable than the movie itself. Going Bananas, the movie with a talking monkey.
No goodbye! No goodbye! Goodbye, Bonzo!
And Ninja 3, The Domination, probably the only martial arts exorcism movie out there, which also has shades of Flashdance. During the 1980s, the Cannon Film Company was facing many financial hardships due to poor business decisions and an onslaught of cinematic flops, as well as dodgy stories out there about the practices of the company, which was putting many people off doing business with them. Yeah, business-wise, there was apparently a lot of nefarious going-ons behind the scenes, not to mention their House of Cards financial structure. The company's founders, Menachem Golan and Yoram Globus, wanted to get their company out of the financial stupor that it was in and release a string of big hits that'll put them into leading movie studio territory. The 3 movies the producers were planning to save the company with and put Cannon back on the map was Superman 4: The Quest for Peace, aka the Superman movie that uses the same cheap shot of Superman flying, Over the Top, an exciting action-packed Sylvester Stallone movie about, arm wrestling? Yeah, sure. And of course, Masters of the Universe. Canon Films bought the rights to make the Masters of the Universe movie, beating out all other mainstream studios, and all up would put about $22 million into its budget. Although this made it one of the highest budgets Canon Films had ever worked with on a movie, this was still considered very low, especially for a special effects movie. It's also been speculated that the Masters of the Universe budget was made up of money that was originally intended to be used for Superman 4. In other words, they took most of Superman 4's budget to use for Masters of the Universe. And if this is true, this explains why Superman 4 looks so damn cheap and why Masters of the Universe does actually have pretty good special effects for its time and presentation, all things considering. Now, when it came to the villainous Skeletor, British actor Frank Langella was approached, and he jumped at the opportunity and was really enthusiastic about it. And I think that many agree that he is a highlight in the movie.
I, Skeletor, am master of the universe.
When it came to He-Man himself, the production turned to Swedish martial arts artist turned actor Dolph Lundgren. He was popular at that time, having just played the villainous Soviet boxer Drago in Rocky IV. But despite his sudden popularity at that time, this proved challenging, as he had very limited English at that time, and even struggled with the words that he did know. There were even serious considerations of just completely dubbing his dialogue altogether with a different voice actor. You see, here's the problem. His casting makes sense in Rocky IV. He didn't really speak much in that movie, he was a silent villain. But now, he was playing the main character in a major Hollywood production. And legend has it that Sylvester Stallone visited the Masters of the Universe set and thought that it was insane that they gave Lundgren a leading role and that it was a speaking part. But in his defense, he does give it his best, and he goes all out as He-Man and really does give it his all. And, you know, what the heck, I really enjoy Dolph Lundgren as He-Man, so I'm completely 100% cool with all this. Directing duties of Masters of the Universe were given to American filmmaker Gary Goddard, in which this was his first big directing gig. And, well, as awkward as it is, there are some, let's just say, pretty unsavory stories about him out there. So yeah, I'm not going to go into that, but the stories are out there. I'm just acknowledging that. The production of the movie was plagued with problems from the get-go. The main issue was money. Really, this was a production that required a big budget in order to bring the world of He-Man to life, but there was just simply no budget. There are claims that during the shoot, crew members and suppliers who were working on the movie were paid with bounced checks. In order to try and save as much money as possible, it was decided to set most of the movie on Earth, so the production wouldn't have to spend lots of money on sets to try and recreate the world of Eternia. We'll just use Earth instead. Problem solved. With the action set around a teenage girl called Julie, played by a pre-friend's Courtney Cox, who is leaving town because she's struggling with the hardships of dealing with her parents' deaths. And in leaving town, she's also going to be breaking up with her supportive boyfriend too. Because this is what kids who watch the Masters of the Universe cartoon want to see. A story about depressing teenage angst. Julie and her boyfriend Kevin find a device called the Cosmic Key, which is from Eternia, which can open up the doors to other dimensions, of which Skeletor needs this device in order to become all-powerful and, well, the master of the universe. Not to mention the guy who calls Marty McFly a slacker is thrown in for good measure. Oh yeah, and there's some guy called He-Man who we see every now and then, yeah, he's just kind of in the background. Needless to say, this movie was not going to match the imaginative fantasy world of the cartoon. Still, it must be pointed out though that this Skeletor minion really does have excellent 80s disco hair. I mean, look at that hairdo, come on, it's beautiful! The filming was meant to take place over a 13-week period, but it ended up being 20 due to production halts. For example, the final fight between He-Man and Skeletor had to come to a complete stop as the production just ran out of money. Thankfully though, the pivotal scene was eventually filmed on a small dark set, but with really varying degrees of success. I mean, it doesn't quite look as epic on film as it probably should have done. There are some shots that look like exactly what it is. He-Man and Skeletor fighting in a small dark set, with it often looking so cramped they can barely move. So with its frantic money issues, and things often coming to a complete standstill, it's here we get to the Ballad of Pig Boy. Despite Masters of the Universe completely chaotic production, Mattel still held a contest in which the winner of the contest would visit the set of the Masters of the Universe movie and even have a small role in the film. Yeah, very exciting. I mean, what kid wouldn't want that? 8-year-old Richard Sponder won the contest, and for his prize, the boy and his family were flown to Los Angeles for 9 days, where they got to visit the movie's set and hang out with the cast and crew, as well as all expenses paid for trips to Disneyland, Universal Studios, and the Queen Mary, not to mention a heap of Masters of the Universe action figures. Now you're talking. So it seemed that young Sponder was living the dream. Then came the part of the prize where the young lad was to have a small scene in the movie. It was originally intended to film Sponder in one of the Earthbound scenes, but due to timing constraints, at that stage all the Earth scenes had been shot. They were signed, sealed, and delivered and in the can. So director Gary Goddard was forced to work around this and create a new character that Sponder could play, where he created the character known as Pig Boy, a minion to Skeletor, who we briefly see carrying his staff. It almost feels like the name Pig Boy was chosen out of frustration. You know, the result of an extremely troubled production who was really up against it, of which was constantly running out of money, was now forced to somehow include a kid who won a contest. Of which the annoyance of the situation led to the very unflattering title of Pig Boy. Of which Sponder was actually credited as Pig Boy, with this poor kid whose crime was winning a contest now forever being tied to the legacy of Pig Boy. And due to heavy makeup, you don't even get to see his face in the movie. But you know what? A now adult Richard Sponder doesn't seem to have any ill feelings towards his Pig Boy experience. He seems pretty happy and content with it. According to a 2010 Q&A, when he was a little boy and visited the set, even though he was in awe of it, his biggest gripe was that Castle Grayskull didn't look anything like the cartoons or toys. He was probably also wondering, why is Mr. Strickland there? Or at least I would have done. Slacker! He also found the movie disappointing when he saw it for the first time, and felt that his tiny little scene had such little consequence, he didn't even notice himself the first time he watched the movie. And apparently, some of his scene was cut out, as originally it does seem like it had more significance. Like apparently there was a scene of Skeletor yelling at him to get out of here where he squanders off. And what's worse, often in TV broadcasts, Sponder's appearance was cut entirely. Yep, no Pig Boy. But once again, he doesn't seem to have any ill will now, and he even got to keep his Pig Boy costume from the movie, so that's a nice little momentum to own. And Pig Boy would go on to be used in a later animated series of Masters of the Universe, so Pig Boy has definitely left his mark in the Masters of the Universe mythology. Now, if kids couldn't wait for the movie to be released in order to get their live-action He-Man fix, there actually was, during 1987, a Masters of the Universe travelling stage show known as the Power Tour. An on-stage event which travelled across the United States and Canada, where kids can see their favourite Masters of the Universe characters on stage, where they would engage in sword fight battles as well as singing and dancing, as you do. Basically a live show to keep everyone's little brats entertained for a good hour and a half, or however the hell long the show went for. But to be fair though, this stage show, unlike the actual theatrical movie, at least had characters which did resemble how they appeared in the cartoon, and actually featured more Masters of the Universe characters than the movie would. However, the real live-action event was now upon us. When Masters of the Universe was released in August 1987, it opened up behind the cop comedy Stakeout and the James Bond movie The Living Daylights. It was no match for those two movies, and it was a complete box office bomb, only bringing in $17 million on its $22 million budget, so it didn't even recoup its finances. Needless to say, Cannon Films' fate was sealed, and it was going down. And if you can believe it, the studio was already gearing up for a Masters of the Universe 2, and sets and costumes were already being put together, which would actually be recycled for fellow Cannon movie, Cyborg. Worse yet, the Masters of the Universe movie was torn apart by critics who thought it was just crappy, another box office noose around the neck of Cannon Films, and its young fans had issues with the changes to the lore from cartoon to movie. They basically felt that this didn't look and feel like that Masters of the Universe cartoon that they had been watching and loved. But, look, I have to be honest, I do find the movie to be a lot of fun and I do have a love for it. And it would be amiss of me if I didn't mention that the Masters of the Universe movie has become a cult classic. Other kids like me who watched it when they were young who actually grew up loving it. And I really love its fun 1980s cheesiness. Maybe I don't love it as much as a He-Man movie, but just a fun, crazy movie from the 80s in general. But this still asks the question, how did it flop so hard? I mean, you would think having the Masters of the Universe title would at least assure some big box office bucks, right? Well, there were other problems at large with the entire franchise. Although Masters of the Universe still brought Mattel a healthy profit of $400 million in 1986, in 1987 there was a sharp decline in profits, in which the franchise just absolutely plummeted. It was clear that public interest was very quickly disappearing when it came to Masters of the Universe. Although it's speculated that the movie caused this, the decline was actually already there before the movie's release. The franchise's drop was put down to oversaturation and poor corporate management. You also have to keep in mind that at this stage, kids were now turning their attention to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which was now the latest big thing, proving that trends really do come and go, and that trends are a never-ending cycle. They're always going to be in succession. Also, there hadn't been any new episodes of the He-Man and Masters of the Universe cartoon, which were made post-1985. So, attention spans drifted and kids lost interest. Looking back in hindsight, Mattel and Filmation should have produced more episodes beyond the original 130 episodes. It would have kept things new and fresh, rather than it being the year 1987 and relying on shows produced in 1983 and 1984, episodes the child viewers had probably already seen at that point. Really, the brand had fizzled out. And honestly, it probably doesn't matter how bad or good the movie may have been. Maybe its fate was sealed because the brand had reached the end of its line in 1987. Really, the Masters of the Universe movie had everything going against it. It was being produced by a movie studio that was collapsing, based on a toy and cartoon franchise which itself was also collapsing. The movie really could not have come out at a worse time. And it makes you think, had it come out a year or two earlier, and by a movie studio that wasn't incompetent or financially crumbling, would things have been different? Look, but sometimes you just have to take what you've got, and I am happy with the 1987 movie, even with its pig boys and eccentricities. In 1990, a sequel animated series was put together and broadcast called The New Adventures of He-Man, now giving it a more space-age science fiction twist. But it was too late. This rebrand of He-Man didn't take off. And in the decades since, He-Man actually would come back several times, sometimes loved, sometimes loathed. But He-Man is now, one way or another, always going to be with us. It's no longer a brand which lasted for 5 years during the 80s, but is now a celebrated part of the pop cultural zeitgeist. So one way or another, He-Man will always be here with us. And if an iteration of the character ever comes out that no one likes, hey, no problem. He'll just be rebooted yet again in a few more years' time. But what was given to the world from 1982 to 1987 is considered the original Masters of the Universe run, and was to many the most memorable and magical. So that was my look into the original iteration of Masters of the Universe. Pig Boy and all. That 1987 movie is fascinating because if you watch that film, you'll see that we don't actually learn anything about He-Man, who's meant to be the star of the show. We don't know what makes him tick, nor does he have any growth or development. It's like the movie assumes that you know who He-Man is, you've seen the cartoon, so what's left to know about him? There he is. That's all you need. Interestingly, it's really Courtney Cox's movie. That entire film centers around her character. But, you know, all said and done, I do have a strong love for that film. And really, the early days of He-Man in general. It was a massive part of my childhood. I think back then, when a popular franchise simply just fizzled out, that was kind of seen as the end of it. It was done. End of the road, Charlie! We didn't have this concept that things will come back and be remembered as important chapters of pop culture. But come back several times, Masters of the Universe did, and it's no doubt going to continue to from here on. Anyway, I'm Minty, and the rise and sudden fall of Masters of the Universe, as well as Pig Boy, let's not forget Pig Boy, is a weird tale of pop culture. Do 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 do.